Just so to reiterate what Sebastian was talking about before, we have this material for this tutorial that was found on this page here. I sent a link before in the chat, and you can either download the material here, or you can look at it directly on GitHub. So if you have to head to this GitHub page, you see here the folders for the different parts here. These are the 3 parts we've already gone through. And now we're on to this 4th part here, where we're actually gonna go ahead and write the schema. So in this folder, we have some files that you will use later. And there's also a little bit of information about this part and also the exercise that we will do later. So in this part then, I'll show you how to create your own data schema so that we can create this custom ELN entry for something that we want to enter. So what is it that we want to enter? So I have a little example here, which is some part of the data revision by one of our collaborators at EGET for some MBE, and there's lots of details. We don't have time to go through all of it, but we will just focus on this little part up here, which is a description of a substrate that they use in this process. So this is what I thought that we would do a little bit hands-on today, try to add this information here into a custom ELN so that we can create instances of different substrates with different materials and so on and so forth in Nomad. So like Andrea mentioned before, what we want to do, so we can have a quick look at Andrea's slide, we want to create this schema here so that Nomad can generate a template for us that we can then fill with data, right? So here we want to create a template for the substrates, and we can fill this with the information that's there. And then we can create the structured archive. So to create the schema, we do this with this YAML file that Andrea also started to talk about. So a YAML file you can create in any text editor you have, so Notepad, Notepad++, anything like this. I will use an actual IDE, so I will use VS Code for this. And I'll just create the file. So I'll call it my schema. And then I will add a little .schema to specify that it's really a schema file. It's not necessary, but it's just for notation. And then the important part is to write archive before the .yaml to tell Nomad that this is really going to be an archive file that we want to put in there, and then Nomad will parse it correctly. So the archive and the YAML is important, and then before here you can really put sort of whatever you want. So now we will try to create this file here, and then we have the empty YAML file. And the first thing that we want to put in this YAML file is we want to put definitions. So basically we want to tell, spell it correctly, we want to tell Nomad that here is a set of definitions that we want to have. So we want to have the schema, the representation of this toolbox from Andrea's presentation. And we can give this collection of schemas a name. So we can call something like my custom schemas, maybe something like this. And then we want to actually define our sections. So the sections are these actual entries that we want to put. So we put simply sections, and then we put enter, and we indent. And this is what Andrea was talking about, this grouping in YAML. So by indenting, we create a group here of sections. And here we now create our sections. And we can call this what we want. I'll just call it my substrate, because that's what we wanted to create, right? And then we hit enter and indent again, and then we are now inside of this substrate class, and we add some definitions. And the first thing that I'm going to put here is I'm going to put base sections, and then I'm going to put a list, and the list you put in YAML by just putting a dash. And then I'm going to put in nomad.data model.data.entry data. And this is an example of this inheritance that Andrea was talking about, and I will talk more about this in the part 6, where I will explain a little bit more. But just for now, this basically just tells Nomad that this section that we're putting here is not going to be some subsection of some experiment further down, but this is really a main entry that we want to create with this create entry button that Florian was showing. So that's just something that we have to put in top. And then we can actually put our quantities that we want to have in the substrate. So we put this by writing quantities here. And then we can put our quantities. So if we have a look into our little data revisions here, we see that we have some ID here in the beginning. So maybe we start by putting that in. So then we can type a name, and here we just use lowercase with underscore or something like this, like a program code, and then it will be shown a little bit nicer later. So put this ID, and then we put some attributes of this ID. And then the one thing that we really need is the type of this. So is this a number that we're storing? Is it some date we're storing? What is it that we're storing? And in this case, it's just an ID. It's just a string. So it's just a list of characters that we are putting in there. So that's really all you need to define a section, my substrate, base section quantities, and so on. So we can go ahead and save this guy, and then we can head back to Nomad. So I will just go to my uploads page here, and here we can see that we have this first upload that Florian created and shared with me. So I can just enter this upload, and here I see Florian's first ELN thing that he added. But what we want to do is we want to add our custom schema. So we simply drop in our YAML file. So this is the YAML file that I just wrote here. We open that one, and Nomad will parse this one, and then it will say here that it was a success and the type is a schema. So we now successfully created our schema. We can open and have a look at it. So if we see here, there's a schema definitions, and this defines my substrate. So if we click on this thing here, we actually see what is it we've defined here. So we have some base sections. This is what I said, just to get an entry data here. But the ones that is interesting here is that we defined an ID, right? And we can see that this is a type string here. We have a Python backend, but it's a type string, and this is the ID parameter here. So this is now our schema, and now we can go ahead and create one instance of this substrate that we have here. So then we head back to the upload, we can navigate back to it up here, and then we can actually create an entry. So you remember that Florian was doing this, and he used this basic ELN, but what we want to do is we want to go to custom schema, and we want to find our schemas that we made. So we just type my custom schemas here. And under here, you see that we have my substrate. And then we have to give it a name. So maybe hit back here. We can use this ID here. Maybe that's the name for our entry. So that's all we need to do. And then we can just hit create. So once we do this, we see that we've now created our entry here. But we see that there is actually nothing here. So it just says my substrates and it's empty. So why is this? So what we can do is we can hit this button here, all defined. And if we do this, we see that there is actually an ID in here, but it's not actually giving in an ELN field that we can edit. And this might be useful if you want to have some non-editable quantities that you want to put into your schema. But what we want to have is we really want to have a text field here where we can put in the ID of each and every substrate that we create, right? So in order to do that, we head back to our YAML file. So remember, we have this quantities ID here, and we need to add something called annotations. So we need to add a little annotation that tells Nomad a little bit how to deal with this. So we put annotations here, and then specifically we want to use the ELN annotation. So this is the syntax that we use, and we want to tell it that for the ELN, you should use a component here, and this component is a string edit quantity. And I will show you later where you can find the list of all of these quantities that you can use. But for now, we just use a string edit quantity because we want to edit strings. And if we just save this and head back to Nomad, go back to the upload here, we can just re-upload this file here. And once this is processed, we see success. Then we can head back to our substrate class here. And if we look into this here now, we see that we have a nice ID field where we can actually go ahead and paste in our ID from before, and we can hit save. And now we have a first instance of this substrate with an ID. Great, right? But if we look back into our data revisions here, we see that we have some more things. So let's go ahead and just add a couple of more of these and show some different types that we can use for creating ELNs. So I will go ahead and create some more quantities, and this you simply do by just adding more quantities here. So we'll go ahead and we'll add back quickly in our data revision. We see that we have some material here, so we can go ahead and add that. And just to save a little bit of time, I'll just copy paste this thing to not have to repaste it. So we can say that we have now something called material here. It's still a type string, and it has a string edit quantity, so that's fine. And then maybe we want to have also, there was some date received here. So we have some date, might want to put that in. So we'll go ahead and paste in here and call that date received. But now it's no longer a string, right? So this here, we really want Nomad to understand, or we want the structured data to say that this is really now a date time here. So then we will simply type that this is a date time. So we're using Python classes in the backend, so we can just use the Python date time here. And then we don't want to have a string edit quantity, but we want to have this date picker that I think even Florian showed quickly how that looked. So then we just write here date time edit quantity. What else did we have? So if we look back, we also have some doping type here. where we have some options, NP and none. I guess none means intrinsic in this case that we can put in. So let's also try to put that. So again, I will just paste this one, and then we will call this doping type. And now we want to use an enumerated list. And the way to do this is that we actually have to define both what the kind of the type is. So in this case, the type kind will be enum. And we also need to provide some data for this, right? Because there are a few options that we were able to provide. So we write type data, and then we create a list. Remember, lists in YAML was just a dash like this, and then we add things, and we had that it could be n. Oops. It could be n. It could be p, right? And also intrinsic, which in this schema is called none. So we put this in here, and now we don't want to have a string, but now we want to have an enum edit quantity. And actually, I want to also use a radio enum edit quantity. I'll show you how this looks later, but it's basically just a button that you can click between these two. There's a few options for this as well. Okay, so far we've only added strings and date times and enums, and nothing with really like values with units. But if we look here, we also have some doping here, which seems to be measured as some resistivity in ohm centimeters. So we can try to add this as well. So we go ahead, the quantity, call this doping. And here we now want to have a floating point value. So this isn't in programming, this just means that we have a value, a decimal value. And I will actually specify that this is a NumPy float 64 to really tell that this should be a 64-bit floating point value that we use here. So this is for these numbers. And I want to have this to be a number edit quantity in Nomad because I want to edit a number. But now we want to add this unit, right? And this we simply add as another attribute here. So we say that the unit of this is going to be ohm centimeter, like this. And then maybe since this was a little bit a weird way of measuring doping, maybe we also put in some description here that this is the doping measured as electric resistivity, something like this, right? Description there. Okay. Yeah, and then was there something else that we can add? Here's some information, some comment. This could be nice maybe to have. And here we want to have some longer piece of text. So the way that we can do this is that we can, instead of using this string edit quantity from before, we call this comment, and we use something called a rich text edit quantity. And I will show you how this shows up in the schema. Okay, so now we have added a bunch of quantities here. We have the ID from before, remember, and then we added material, date, doping type, doping comment, so on. So here's just an example of a couple of different ones. So we'll just go ahead and save this file. I'll head back to Nomad here, go back to my uploads again and pop here. And then I will just again re-upload this file here. And then when this is re-uploaded, we see here that the schema was successfully uploaded. So that's good to know. And then we can head back into our substrate here. And now we see that we have a bunch of different things here, right? So we have the ID from before, we have the material, I believe that was germanium. We have a date received. We can go back and look here. It was on the 4th of October last year. So I'll just use the date picker here. And this is what you get by using this datetime edit quantity. And I will just jump back to October last year. We can also select the doping type. This is these radio buttons, where if you only have a few choices, it looks pretty nice. So we can say it's P here. There wasn't actually any doping specified, but there was a comment. And this is what I meant about this rich text edit. So here you can really put in images. You could put in lots of information here if you don't really have another field where you want to put in it. So any rich text edit goes in here. So I think there was a description. Copy paste this description. Go ahead and put that into here. Okay, and when we're done, we can hit save here, and we see that that these things are saved into this entry, and we've created our first substrate with some actual information on it. There's one more thing that I want to show. So for now, everything here is in the top level, right? So we have my substrate, but maybe we want to have a group some things together, right? We want to say that some of the things belong together somehow, and for that we can use a subsection. And what I thought we'd use that for is this dimensions here. So this is saved, is written a little bit awkwardly here with just some stars here. So maybe it would be better to have a dimension section where we have a length, a width, and a height, right? So we can do that. So I'll jump back to our section here. And then on the level of quantities, so if we come out, we can write something called subsections. And here we can define a new section indented so that we can have other sections nested within. And this can then go arbitrarily deep. We can put sections within sections within sections and so on, and create a complicated structure. Then I will just use some feature here in VS Code to see, it was not quite on the right level, one level in. So I'll put the subsections here. And then for this, I will just go ahead and I will write the name of the subsection that I want to have. So in this case, we wanted to store some dimensions. So let's call this dimensions. And then I will just write here the section. So here is where you would then put the definition of the section that we want to put in. You could reference to a section that you define somewhere else, or you can really just start to write the things here. Sorry, section. And then we simply do the same as we did above. We add our quantities here, for example. So what we have length, right? Then I'll just go ahead and copy this quantity from up here, retype all of this. Indent everything properly. Then we call this length. Again, here now we don't want to have a string, right? But here we want to have some sort of floating point value here. We want to have a number edit quantity, and probably we want to have a unit for this, right? And I think they used millimeters in the schema, so we put millimeters in here. And then we can also tell Nomad that it should really use this, so we can use something called default display unit. And this is that we tell Nomad that you should really show this in millimeters and not in some meters or something like this. And then we can just copy paste this and add it 2 more times to add our width and our height. Height, yeah, okay. So now we've added our subsection, which is called dimensions, and we have a section here with some quantities, length, width, and height. So once again, we can just save this, head back to Nomad, go back to our upload, re-upload our file here, and this one. And then we see that this has successfully been parsed here. We can head back into our substrate. And we won't see anything here in the overview page, as here we just show the top level. But in order to actually go to this, we jump into the data page and click into our data field. This will be fine here. And then when we scroll down, we see that now we have a subsection here called dimensions. And if we click this plus button, we actually add this subsection. And here we now see that we have our length, our width, and our height. And here we could, in principle, have more subsections and go deeper if we wanted to. And here I'll now put in, I believe it was 25 millimeters by 25 by 0.14. And then we can hit save, and then we have all of this, this information in here. Okay, so now we've created our substrate. We have all of this information in here. So now I will leave you guys with this, and then we will move on to the exercise. And for the exercise, you can find the exercise written in this part 4 thing here. We have, I want you to grab this file that I have in here, the schema file, and then extend it by just adding a string quantity called name. So this is just, you can have a look at how I did it and try to do that. And then you can log in to this Nomad beta server with the login that you hopefully did during Florian's part. Otherwise, you can do it now and add it to your uploads there by just uploading this my schema, this modified YAML, and then you can create an instance of this my substrate and fill it with some information. And then if you have some more time, you can add some more quantities using this edit quantities that can be found here. So I can have a look. There's a list here of different types of edit quantities that you can use, and you can play around and add whatever information you would want to have for your substrate. And then we will be here. So any questions you have to what I just said now, or if you're running into any problems, just let us know, and we should hopefully be able to answer them. Maybe I'll leave this one open. Okay, thank you.